Hey, mama friend. Welcome to the Mama Mindset Podcast. I'm your host and creator, Amy Cawthron. Thank you for joining me today. Today's episode is with Johanna. I have known her for 17 years, which makes me feel old. But we met in high school. She was an exchange student when I was a junior, and we've recently reconnected in our podcasting journeys. And her platform is talking about entrepreneurialism. She is a business coach as well as an entrepreneur herself. And today she wanted to bring value to you, just my listeners, in talking about moms and entrepreneurship. One of the things that we struggle with as moms is our confidence in entrepreneurialism. Do we have a place? Are we valuable? Is there a way for us to be successful while still balancing time with our families and not making that putting that on the back burner, actually still making that a priority? Is there a place for us? We don't have to be this unicorn business out there. And she talks about what a unicorn business is. If you're thinking, I don't know what you're talking about, Amy. What is a unicorn business? She explains that in detail for us. She's a wonderful resource. So grab a cozy beverage and join me and Johanna in this conversational journey on mompreneurs. Hi, Johanna. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Amy. Thanks for having me. I'm so excited.
Absolutely. I'm so excited to have you on. As we were talking before we started recording, it's been 17 years since we've actually seen each other in person, which is, God, it makes me feel old.
For sure.
Yeah. So a little backstory for listeners. Johanna came to our high school when I was a junior for our junior year as an exchange student from Germany. And we've actually stayed in touch just via social media, the power of social media over the years, and seen each other kind of grow and move in and out of careers and jobs, and kids on my end and more kids on my end, and then another kid on my end, all of these decisions. But so you're back in Germany, and I would love for you to introduce yourself to my listeners and who you are and what you're doing now.
Sure. Yeah. And I think just to begin with, I think this is so cool that we're having this conversation, because I don't think either you or me as 17-year-olds would have imagined that way down the line we would be on a podcast together. So this is beyond cool. So
yeah, and we launched our podcasts about the same time, which was really, I mean, again, like the power of social media and staying in touch and all of those things. And you had posted on social media, you started a podcast on entrepreneurship and business. And I was like, that's crazy. I started a podcast too, which is, And so, and that was several months ago. And then it just kind of organically grew, or kind of organically aligned for us to get to the point where we could do this now, which I love. Yeah. So anyways, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Go ahead and continue.
All good. I'm glad you're providing the backstory here. So I'm after, as you were saying, many twists and turns in my career, I'm a business and executive coach, and I was a founder before of a tech startup, and I actually co-founded my first business when I was 20. So I have quite a bit of experience already in entrepreneurship. And the one thing I noticed is that I think we have this idea of being an entrepreneur that's either, informed by Forbes magazine, where you have to have like major success, or it's sort of, kind of what are you doing here? Or it's, in the tech world where it's all about building a unicorn and really, and I don't want to say anything against hard work, but there's the point where, when you work 80, 120-hour weeks, I'm not sure that's the most sustainable model for success, or actually doing work or running a business. So we have that. And then there's all this sort of niche entrepreneurship going on, coaches or people with Etsy shops or like small clothing lines. And I always I felt like there's how are we talking about entrepreneurship, and what is the definition of success that we're aspiring to with entrepreneurship? And through my own experience, I realized that there's so many shoulds and so many have tos, and there's so much content and biographies and magazines and interviews that sort of pushed out, that I think informs what we do when we have a business or when we think about business, that I imagine it really deters people. And the work I do is really to work with entrepreneurs and people who want to have a business or who want to go freelance, to help them do this thing their own way and run it their own way and find success on their own terms. Because what success is to me, might sound like a nightmare to you, or
Mhm.
what you consider success might actually be something that somebody else aspires to and says, oh, this is cool. I haven't actually thought about doing it this way. So I'm really all about working with people to find their own lane and then to really thrive in that lane.
Mhm.
Mhm.
I love that a lot. And I love that you're bringing that to my mom listeners,
Mhm.
because I think we look at entrepreneurialism as, like you said, and just to clarify, when you say unicorn, you're talking like big business. Do you want to explain
Yeah.
maybe what you mean if the moms
Yeah.
aren't sure what you mean by unicorn?
Mhm. Oh, for sure. Yeah. So unicorn is the term for over the life cycle of a startup. You start out, very small, and then through different rounds of investment, because typically speaking, a startup doesn't have enough money on its own, or it doesn't really generate enough revenue to keep going on its own. So it relies on outside financing to grow.
Mhm.
And every time someone else gives money to that startup, they have to decide, well, how much money to give and what they think the startup is worth, right? Because you can't just pump, like, let's say $10 million into a startup without knowing, you know, the amount of the share that you get, if you get 10% for it, or if you get 20 for it, or just five, right? And that sort of
Mhm.
determines the value of the company. And the really cool thing, quote unquote, in tech is when you have or run a unicorn company, because a unicorn is a company that's above $1 billion in value. So those are, them being named unicorns already implies that they're pretty rare, not so much anymore, but they used to
Mhm.
be. That was the idea. So for instance, Airbnb, Facebook, Instagram, Reddit, all of those companies that we know that came out of the tech sphere that are really big, also Glossier, for instance, the makeup company, all of those are considered unicorns because they had some time earlier, this valuation of being worth $1 billion.
Okay. Okay. Thank you for clarifying, because I think people would
Sure.
not maybe understand what that term
Mhm.
is. But I think when we start looking into entrepreneurialism, we get, like you're
Mhm.
saying, just kind of mirroring what you're saying, this intimidation factor of,
Mhm.
well, I can't be an entrepreneur unless I'm making, you know, even seven figures. And that's
Mhm.
like intimidating in itself, is just like the
Mhm.
idea of making a seven figure
Yeah.
in on a business. Like, where do you start? And so
Mhm.
what we're going to dive in today is just kind of your perspective on building that confidence and
Mhm.
giving space to moms specifically, because that's who the listeners are,
Mhm.
to dive into things that they're passionate about. So we have a lot of different avenues that we can take
Yeah.
this. And if we need to have a
For
second
sure.
podcast episode, we can definitely do
Oh,
that.
yeah, I would love that. Or
But
if you
one of
have
the
questions from the audience, actually, that would be cool too.
Yes, I would love to do that. Actually, I'm kind of diving into some
Mhm.
live episodes that I want to do live, where people can kind of
Ooh,
interact with
how
us, and then
cool.
we can
How
record it
cool is
and then
that?
launch it as a separate episode too. So
Oh,
yeah, so if
that
people
sounds
like,
so cool.
doesn't that sound fun? So yeah,
Yeah.
if anybody
Yeah.
listening has questions, write them down, take some notes on today,
Mhm.
and then we'll try and do like a live Q&A, or just
Mhm.
email either Johanna or myself, and we can
Mhm.
answer those too. But so let's dive into, I'm trying to decide like exactly where I want to take this, but one of the things that I'm super passionate about, and I have a whole episode on it for myself personally, is that as a stay-at-home mom, since I've been out of the
Mhm.
workforce for 7 years now, is I've kind of coined myself unhireable, because I've
Mm.
now seen this beautiful opportunity to follow my own passions and to
Mhm.
work for myself and to pursue my own dreams my own way.
Mhm.
And I don't know if anybody else has coined this term, but I really feel like I'm unhireable, and I feel like a lot of other moms are that way too. So, I mean, what are your thoughts on that, I guess?
Yeah. So I love how what you just shared actually sort of flips the script on how we usually think about moms in the workforce. And for instance, the company I'm from in Germany, it's always moms re-entering the workforce is always seen as this pretty tricky thing, right? Like where do you enter? Does it impact your career? Are you not going to progress? Like sort of those conversations around basic, I would say, that are informed by discrimination based on gender, for instance. And what you just said actually reframes this altogether by actually moms potentially making the choice that they're unhireable because they've discovered that there's something else they can create at home, or that they actually have a lot of opportunities they might not have thought about before becoming moms by being at home. And one of those is, I mean, I love mompreneurs, and I think it's so I was raised by a single mom, and I have so much respect for moms doing the whole household thing, right? Raising the kids, running the show at home, and then even finding time and carving out a space where they're doing their own thing, like you're doing with the podcast now, or where you're even starting small and doing something that, is your passion or that you're excited about, or where you feel like it could be many things. It could be an opportunity for growth. It could just be something you want to explore just for the curiosity of it, to see like, hey, what would it be like to have a podcast? Is that something I can do? Where is that going to lead me down? And I think that is really cool. And there's a lot of magic, and I think there's a lot of power in that, and actually seeing it that way and just saying, okay, I've found my niche. This is cool. Now, what can I do with it, or what do I want to do with it? And I would say, I think the conversation around moms re-entering the workforce, so whether you're hireable or not, is something that I feel is sort of outside of my own expert domain, because it's really nuanced and layered, and I think it depends also on the country and the company you work for. So I don't feel informed enough to really speak about that. But what I can speak about is how entrepreneurship could be a tool that you can use as a stay-at-home mom to really give yourself an area where you can play, and where you can see, how you can have your own thing, or how you can transfer also the skills that you need to have as a mom to make everything work out well at home, or raising kids, into a different field where that also might have some, of course you're doing it for the money too, like you're in a business, you're not running a charity. And I think that's fine, and it's really cool.
Yeah. And I think something that you said earlier, I wanted to kind of dive into a little bit, is like the number of hours that are perceived, that we perceive that we have to push and push, 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 push. And it's like kind of this very masculine based mentality of just hustling. And I think as moms and with a feminine perspective, we can really align with things that we're passionate about and not hustle, not push, 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 which actually puts us into more of almost a servant position, where we can really dive into how do we serve the needs of others? How do we figure out what other people need, what's missing, and dive into that truly with our hearts, because we're such passionate individuals. So utilizing some of these skills that we've developed in giving and understanding and love to really pursue things that we're passionate about without hustling, because it's not
Yeah.
realistic. And there's very successful women out there, and so when you think about starting a business, it's so intimidating, I think, for a lot of people, including myself, honestly, which is why I love having you on the show, because it gives me confidence to keep moving forward too. Is this I don't have enough time idea. Like, I'm already dedicating 24 hours, 7 days a week to my family. How do I then like compartmentalize that, or how do I pivot? And I really think the success of that, and I can't speak from personal experience because I'm just starting out, but I feel it to my core that the success from that comes from merging the two together: home life, family life, and then also serving others, and just bringing everybody into who you are and your family. And maybe I'm wrong, but I mean, what is your take on that from an entrepreneurial standpoint?
So I think you mentioned a lot of things that I
I
love.
know, I'm sorry.
Yeah, this is so I love our conversation. This is so exciting. So the first thing is this whole idea of, going push, 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 an insane amount of hours a week. And I want to touch upon that for a moment, because I think some people, it might be the choice that some people want to make. And when we look to where, part of that ideal comes from, for instance, from Silicon Valley, where you have those stories of young founders and, they're making, they have a unicorn company, or they're hustling their way to a unicorn company. It's also when you look to the life circumstances of those people or those stories that we portray, generally speaking, we see a young university educated male who's already who comes from privilege. So money might not be, the most important consideration to them. And they have, when you're in your early 20s and you have no obligations, you're operating under a whole different set of, conditions than someone who's maybe older than 25 or 27, or who has responsibilities at home or has people to take care of, let them be parents or children or a partner, or even just who wants to have a different type of life. So first off, I really like that you brought that up again, because being in that type of masculine energy a lot, I think, can be depleting, especially when you don't identify with it and you only think you have to do it because that's the way to achieve success. I think that goes out for pretty much everything I'm going to share on this podcast. Or I would if you take away anything from listening to this podcast, it's this: that any type of advice you hear online or that you see, that you read, is you get to be discerning and you get to decide whether what is being shared is helpful to you, whether it's inspiring, whether it makes you grow. It might be tough love too, right? You might not want to hear it. But that might still be beneficial to you. And then there's this other type of advice and information where you feel, you've probably had this too, when you scroll on Instagram and you see a post and then you sort of start thinking about it and you're like, oh, I'm doing life wrong. Like, I'm breathing wrong, I'm eating wrong, I'm doing everything wrong. Like, I might as well just stop existing, or just sit on my couch and stay there, because at least then I'm doing one thing right. So I would say for all of these things, I know I'm going on a tangent here, but this is so important to me. I would just leave you with this question, which is, when you look at the person who's giving that information or giving that advice, does that person lead a life I want to have? Or is that person leading a life where actually what they're saying is in any way applicable or comparable to mine? Because I could also look at, I don't know, Sheryl Sandberg and tell myself like, oh, I'm not leaning in enough, but it's different. It's a different life, and it doesn't make it worse. It doesn't make it better. It's just a different life. So that I just wanted to share in the beginning. The other thing about being an entrepreneur in general is this idea of success. Basically, is in my work, I really care about empowering people to define how they want to do it and what they want to do on their own terms. And if, for instance, carving out 2 hours a week is all you can do, and you can do that every single week, and you manage to record a podcast, for instance, and you publish the podcast, and that draws an audience, and you're happy doing that, then consider that a success. That's fine. I think what's really important is that we're also being kind to ourselves in this, and that we sorry, I think I'm losing my train of thought here, but really, when you look at it, it's also giving yourself the ability to show up fairly consistently. I mean, I know life happens, and especially when you're a mom, you have kids, you can't always plan it for, Friday afternoon, 2 to 4 p.m. I could imagine that being a bit challenging.
Right.
But just allowing yourself to have that little moment in time where you can start working on your thing. And the other thing you mentioned on, which is so cool, is this whole idea of, the empathy and that you develop as a mom, and the love for people, and sort of the service mindset, or serving people is something in business, for instance, that's the one-on-one of customer discovery, of learning what the people you want to serve need, talking to them, anticipating their needs also, and how you communicate with them. So you have, when it comes to marketing or speaking with people who might be your customers, you have the perfect skill set to begin with. So you have that part is already covered, because you know how to tease out needs of people and how to rephrase it in a way that they actually, can't connect with that.
Yeah, I love that. So, and I know this is speaking very generally, but we'll go back to like the 20-year-old male graduating,
Yeah.
college. Like I think they're very money driven, whereas the
Mm,
moms are servicing the needs. They're very passion
mm,
driven. And I think that just puts you in I genuinely believe that that gives you a leg up. You
mm,
can't teach some of those empathy skills. You can't
mm,
teach that connection with people. That has to
mm,
be learned like through
right.
experience. And as a mom, I really feel like you have a leg up in connecting with people and
Mm,
sort of this like servant leadership in a sense. And
mm,
I'm such a proponent of that, which is an interesting, it just blows my mind, to be honest. I'm doing some self-reflecting right now. And I'm just thinking, like,
yeah.
I cannot
Tell me.
believe I'm
Tell me.
having a podcast right now on entrepreneurship because I have been like almost anti-entrepreneurship my whole life.
Mhm,
As a female, I was taught go to school, get good grades, apply for
mm,
colleges, get the career. Get the
mm,
career. We were not taught in school entrepreneurialism. Like we were not taught to follow those pursuits of and those passions. And so I was never a proponent of it. Like and
mm,
even Brad, my husband, is very entrepreneurial, is entrepreneurial mindset and
mhm.
always trying to figure out the next solution and solve a problem.
Cool.
And so here I am
Mhm,
talking to you, starting a podcast, wanting to start this business and grow this. And so I'm just like blown away with the fact that I'm even having this conversation because my mindset has completely shifted and I am
mhm,
passionate about encouraging women and stay-at-home moms to do those things. And something I want to go back to that you talked about was this
mhm,
this unicorn idea. And I
mhm,
think that women, moms that are running some of these Etsy shops they need to like lean into this idea of entrepreneur. Like you are an entrepreneur when you're running
mhm,
an Etsy shop. And if you're making, girl, if you're making $50,000 a year, which is genuinely
mm,
not a lot of money, but there's an abundance out there, right? Like
mhm.
it's actually like very doable for you to make
Yeah.
that amount of money. And it sounds like a lot for somebody that's making
Mhm,
nothing. But when you
mhm,
compare that to what everybody else is making in the world, like
mhm,
it's very, very doable. And the idea of this, when you're reading these business magazines, it's very overwhelming and it's very
mhm,
intimidating. But like you were saying, 2 hours a day, like goes back to this kind of this 1% growth. 2 hours,
mhm.
or I'm sorry, you said 2 hours a week. 2 hours a week, if that's what
Could
you
be
can
enough.
do, but there's
Mm,
52 weeks in a year, that's a lot of hours that you put
mm,
in working
mhm,
on something that you're passionate about. So I don't know. I know I just dove into a lot again right there, but
mm,
I just feel like that's so interesting to me that you can have this entrepreneurial spirit and you can dive into something and lean into something and make a really good income. And
mhm,
that is something that you can be confident about. And so I guess my question for you would be,
mhm,
where should women get this confidence? Like where does that come from?
mhm. Oh, I love that question. That's an amazing question. And one one thing I want to touch upon before I think it goes into this anyways is when we talk about mompreneurs and you were talking about the Etsy shop that can maybe make $50,000 or more, you can be so creative with that. I think the sky's the limit with that, depending on what your ambitions are, of course, right? I
Mhm.
think there needs to be a match with that. But I find that so often when we talk about moms, especially in entrepreneurship, there's like this little pat on the head. It's like, oh, it's cute that you have your own Etsy shop and maybe make, a couple $100 a month. And I think that's really demeaning to women, actually. And
Mhm.
when we talk about the self-confidence piece is, it really in coaching, when I have someone in my practice and we talk about self-confidence, it's not, to be honest, it's not something that you can develop overnight. It's not like, I snap my finger and then it's there. But what you can do, for instance, is there are a couple of things you can do. You can think back to, and I'm sure everyone will have this in one way or the other, an event in your life, something you did, or, it could even be in high school when you won a competition, or when you got an A on a really difficult test, or when you did something where you were really proud of yourself, right? And that's an emotion that you can anchor into. Like, how did you feel? What did you do? What was it like preparing for that? And and what was it like when you actually accomplished the thing that you wanted to accomplish, and really tap into that feeling and see if you can transfer in a way that feeling to the present moment. And right, just really keeping, it's like this inner well that you can draw from, and you can really connect to that and keep drawing from that inner well, that positive emotion that you want to, that you felt. So the good thing about that is you can feel it, and you can do it. So really drawing on that and bringing it back into the present moment and seeing like, okay, I've done it before, I've been really proud of myself before, so I know I can do it again.
Mm-hmm.
That's the first thing. And then another thing about confidence for women in entrepreneurship is really, I just want to tell you, like, it's also systemic. It's not all your fault in a way, because we still have this idea of what there are many ideas of what it means to be a stay-at-home mom. But when Amy and I were talking about before recording the conversation, sort of the idea also of the stay-at-home mom that's out there, like sort of being on the couch and being a hot mess. That's sort of the narrative that exists, is that doesn't have to be your story. And the way this is being presented, basically, or how we talk about mompreneurs is pretty demeaning, like I said in the beginning. And know, whenever you feel like that, also know that it's not all about you and you not doing the thing, or you not motivating yourself enough. There is this component of like the narrative, or how society sees moms or mompreneurs, or some parts of it, that you can also allow yourself to step out of it, because it's not your story. Or you can, when you have those moments come up, I think the most important thing really is to cultivate awareness. Like,
Mm-hmm.
what's going on inside of me? What am I feeling right now? Why am I feeling this? Was it something someone said? Did it bring up something in me? What can I do? And what is this teaching me also? I find that's a really helpful question. Like, what is this showing and teaching me? And when you approach it from a growth mindset of, okay, I don't like this feeling. I really hate not feeling self-confident right now. But why did what that person said, or how they treated me, or why did that thing, like, what did it do with me? Why did it trigger me, maybe? And what can I learn from this, right? Or what can I do next time, or what can I take away from it? So next time I feel stronger, or I feel prepared when someone makes a comment like that, or things like that, help you over time to lean into building that self-confidence. And more so, to build, if you build that awareness for you and for the present moment, even though it sounds like very meditation right now, but it's really about asking yourself, like, what's going on inside of me right now?
Mm-hmm.
How come that's happening, and what can I learn from it? Is so powerful and transferable to so many areas in your life. Not always easy.
Yeah, right.
And I have, to be honest, also to be transparent here, this is like a lifelong process. And
Mm-hmm.
as a coach too, I have a coach, I ask myself these questions, and it's just something that, if you do it, it will bring you so much information, and I guess a piece of enlightenment about yourself as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I can only draw off of personal experience, right? I can't
Mhm,
really give other personal examples of other people and what they've done. But when I started
mhm.
out with this podcast, I was actually questioned on whether or not I was happy at home. My
Oh.
happiness in who I am as an individual and what I'm doing at home was
Mhm,
actually questioned by somebody very close to me.
mm,
And so you immediately, diving into that topic of
mhm,
confidence, I immediately started reflecting on myself. Well, am I happy? Maybe I'm not happy. Maybe that's why I started this. And then you have to dive a little bit deeper and keep
mhm,
thinking that, like, keep exploring that. And then I
mhm,
kind of came out on the other side, like, no, I'm incredibly happy.
mhm,
Going back full circle, like I was reminding myself, that's why I wanted to start the podcast, because I've
mhm,
done the inner work, I've done the outer work, I've created systems within my home that
mhm,
I want to then share with others.
mhm,
I have gotten I mean, and I'm not saying I'm happy and everything is all hunky dory every single day, but I did the work, I did the work, and I felt like I had tapped into something and found some success with what I had done. And I wanted to share that with other people.
mhm,
So for me, it was like questioning my worth, questioning my value, and if I have a place or if I'm doing this
mhm,
for the right reasons, diving in a little bit deeper, and then coming out on the other side saying like, no, like I am really happy. This is where I should be. And then confidence builds from there.
Mm.
So you almost, to me, that actually helps to have your confidence questioned, to break you down a little bit. And then you
Ooh.
have to do the work and then build yourself up again to where like at that point, if anybody ever questions like, well, are you happy? I'm never going to be like, well, am I? Because I'm already going to think, no, I've already been there. I've already done that. And I know for a darn fact that I am happy. And that's why I'm doing this. I don't know if that makes sense. Does that make sense? It
It
like
does. It does.
breaks
Yeah.
you down to a level, you do the work, and then come out on the other side where you're then built up again. You can't come back down to that other level. So I love that. I love that you talk about doing that inner work and then how you come out on the other side. There's this term that kind of goes around, and I wanted to see kind of what your thoughts are on this. And it's that you're born an entrepreneur. I guess it's not really a term, but it's more of a phrase that you're born an entrepreneur. And that really bothers me a lot, because it makes it seem like if you're not born a certain way, or if you don't have a certain personality, you aren't capable of creating something. And so what have you come across that in your coaching? It kind of ties back into that confidence, right? If I'm not born this way, if I don't have this like perfect mentality, then maybe I'm not capable of doing something that I'm passionate about.
Yeah. That's so interesting, because that again also ties into this whole thing, how we think about entrepreneurship, how it's sort of presented to us, what the narrative around it is. And I will say, I think there are maybe people, same with, pretty much everything we do in life, like could be working out or something. It comes maybe a bit more instinctual to some people than to others, right? But we love the story of the again unicorn founder who was selling cookies in the schoolyard and already making a profit, right? Like to show that is a personality trait the person already had, and that's why they're so successful right now. Oh, my hands are moving out of the screen.
You're okay. I talk with my hands too much. If anybody watches this on YouTube, they get a very like animated version of me.
So we like showing that, but at the heart of that is something that we call survivorship bias, which is basically when we have a certain outcome X and we look, or Y, and we look at the X factors that contributed to Y happening. And we, for instance, typical example is the world of acting, right? You see someone who's winning an Oscar, who might be, I don't know, like Nicole Kidman. You're from Australia listening to this, and you're like, oh, I'm Australian. I like to, I want to be an actress, and maybe I have red hair. So that, could mean that I can actually make it. And basically, the survivorship bias tells us it has to do about when we look back at the factors that contributed to something, a certain outcome happening, and we derive our explanation from that. So X person made it to be an actor, Y person made it to be a successful actor. So I can too, because I have XYZ trait, right? Or we attribute their success to maybe shared traits that we see, but we don't know about all the other 1,000, tall, red-haired Australian actresses who never made it beyond, maybe they're a small theater production or something. So we're really selective with how we perceive information. And that also, I know this is very meta now, but that also contributes to sort of how we think about entrepreneurship, because we always think it has to be this, go-getter type, and it has to be a certain way. And while, of course, being a go-getter helps you, there are other ways to be an entrepreneur. You can figure out, you can be you and still be an entrepreneur. You might need to be a bit more creative, because there might not be as much information or as many resources out there for you, or for how you perceive yourself as a person. So maybe if you're an introvert and you hate cold calling people, and all the information that you see on being an entrepreneur, or the stories we hear about successful entrepreneurs are like, oh, they called 1,000 people and then they made $100,000 that year. Maybe that's not your path to success, but that doesn't mean that you are lacking something. in being an entrepreneur. Your job is just to get creative and see how you can use what you have and your skills and your personality, and how you can figure out, or how you can use that to still meet your goals in a different way. So I don't think there is inherently the entrepreneurial personality. There are also studies that show that women in general are a bit more, because we also have this idea of men being like these risk taker entrepreneurs, and they're like living on the couch for half a year and then they have their big break. And women, generally speaking, supposedly have been shown to be a bit more risk, not averse, but more risk conscious. So I think, generally speaking, about when you deviate from that norm in entrepreneurship and us, quote unquote, being more risk conscious, I don't know if it holds true or not. I think your listeners can decide. It shows that there has to be a different way, because there are women who are entrepreneurs and who are maybe not like, the typical idea that we have around entrepreneurship. So yes, you can do it for sure. Don't be sad if you're not, the super go-getter type. You will figure out a different way to do it. Maybe you're really good, for instance, this is a good example. Maybe you're a really good natural networker, right? And that what you were telling about earlier, this whole, all the skills that you learn, the social skills of being a mom and anticipating people's needs and connecting with people and really meeting them where they're at. I imagine that is something that you can take and become an expert networker. So maybe your success will not come out from, cold calling people, but from really, tapping into your network and talking to people, or like asking for referrals, like, hey, I'm doing this thing. Do you know someone, right? Could also work with people you're already familiar with. So it's really just as an example to show you that it's really possible to do the thing without being, quote unquote, the, cookie cutter example of the entrepreneur.
Yeah. And I think that when you can network with other women too, what I'm finding is that using that compassion and that empathy to grow your community and networking by using other women, like women, and especially moms. I say moms always want to help other moms. It's like a motherly instinct. Moms want to help other moms. So if you can use that and that's your community to kind of help each other and collaborate, like in a very non-competitive way, I've just witnessed, and that's just in the my very recent time, especially in podcasting, is this beautiful idea of abundance and this beautiful idea of collaborating with other women. And it's this lack of competition that is totally new to me in entrepreneurialism, like in corporate or in larger businesses, there's like this very competitive side. But when you start as an entrepreneur, yeah, there's like a little bit of competition involved because you want to succeed. But really, like, who are you competitive with? You're kind of competitive with yourself, I think.
Exactly.
But when you work with other moms or you're working with other women, I really find this, I'm not as intimidated because they want to help you, you can help them, and everybody can work together and everybody can grow in their own way. Because what I found just witnessing, if other people aren't going to work sort of with you, not for you, but with you in this very like beautiful synchronized atmosphere. I don't know if I'm explaining that right. Then it's really a detriment to their own business. With it has its limitations and things like that too. But I wanted to talk to you about something though that I feel like women struggle with, and that's finding their worth and finding their value. And then we talk about pursuing these passions and putting something up on Etsy. Well, we've kind of talked about that a couple of times, so we can kind of use that example if you want.
Sure.
And I struggle with this a lot, and it's knowing how much I'm worth and knowing my value and asking for money. So I can go out and I can give you all this advice for free. Like I can talk to you all day long. And if we're at the library, if we're out, like I can give you all of this advice for free. But when you start to put a price tag on it, when you start to actually ask for, and you need to monetize something, it's very difficult to then know your worth and find value within that aspect of it. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. Can I ask you something on that?
Yeah, absolutely.
What are the feelings, or what comes up for you when you're at a point where you're thinking about putting the price tag on it?
Oh, that's a great question. Okay. So this is something that I've like recently started exploring a little bit,
Mhm.
is that I'm new to
Mhm.
something and and I'm not knowledgeable enough compared to other people. So it's very
Mhm.
fear based that by asking for money
Mhm.
or creating something, is I'm going to be turned down,
Mm.
because it's no longer free. My other thoughts on things is, which I don't know how deep we want to go with this, but that I actually undervalue other moms, because I'm like, nobody's going
Mm.
to be able to afford to do something, or nobody's going to, stay at home moms aren't going to want to pay for that. So I'm
Mm.
actually contradicting my own thought process here in bringing value to moms by
Mm.
saying, well, they're not going to want to pay for that. Does that make
Mhm.
sense? So I'm
Mhm.
like,
Yeah, I
wait
feel
a
you.
second, I'm not even following my own rule, because like they are valuable and they are going to want to pay for things. They are going to want to buy things. So it's definitely fear based when you start to put a dollar amount to something. So
Mhm. For sure, for sure. And I've had the same thing come up for me too, to
mhm,
be entirely transparent.
mhm,
And I still, depending, I think, on where you're at and what you're doing, or if you're introducing a new product, a new service, it still comes up for me, right? So
mhm,
just to share that with you and your audience, that's, even though this is literally my work, I still, it would be very dishonest to you to tell you that I will, I never think about this again. I'm like, everything's hunky-dory and
mhm,
perfect. And so one thing is, like, it really, some of it comes down to how we think about money, I would say. Or that is one avenue I would invite you to, or somebody who has the same question, to explore and see how we think about money,
mhm,
because we have religious beliefs rooted in it, we have societal beliefs rooted in it. And for me, for example, it was always, and I'm still working on that people with money are evil. So I can't have money because then I'm evil. Or maybe as a women in our societies, when you are wealthy, or when you ask for your worth, or when you ask for money, you're deemed bad, or terrible person, selfish, all the entire
mhm,
diorama of wonderful emotions and thoughts we can all have, especially the
mhm.
negative ones. Isn't it funny how we can get so creative with all the bad stuff, right? But then when it's about,
Yes.
like, ooh, have all those
Yes.
scenarios, scenarios
Yeah.
and vivid colors. And usually they don't happen, but still, like, my mind is fantastic at that. And I'm teaching it right now to think, that's not the reality we want. Let's color in, like, let's paint the other reality in vivid colors. But um for something a bit more practical, there's a wonderful book, that's called Overcoming Under Earning, that I
Mm,
really like. And it is geared a bit more towards, women who are in the workforce, but a lot of the work that is on money mindset in there, you can apply it as a business owner, or as a budding business owner as well. And the book really explores sort of, one thing I thought fascinating was this idea of, there's a list of, numbers that you have to go through, for instance, and how you relate to them. Like, if you can see yourself making that amount of money,
mhm,
and where sort of your inner glass ceiling is. And when I went through the list, I also gave it to my mom and to other women, um, I'm friends with. We all went through it, and it was all, for each and every one of us, there was this feeling inside of, like, oh, you could really physically feel where the limit was, or where the threshold was.
mhm,
And even knowing that is, it's really fascinating, because even that awareness to see, like, oh, apparently I have these ideas of what's safe for me, what a safe amount is,
mhm,
what an amount is where I'm still considering myself maybe a good person, all of these things. So I really recommend that book. That's great,
mhm,
just in terms of building awareness around money. And then in terms of, and because as women we also tend to underprice ourselves, and sort of overthink it a little bit.
mhm.
So
I
you
think
can
it's
always
super
do.
important to say too. I want to just
Yeah,
interject just
go
really,
ahead, go
really
ahead.
quick, because I think it's very important for women to understand that this is mostly female based.
Yeah.
Men, statistically speaking, and I don't have the
Hmm.
statistic obviously, but in general, men don't struggle with this the same way that women do, like men entrepreneurs. So
Mhm.
this conversation that we're having, men go into stuff and they're like, I am worth this,
Yeah,
you know,
exactly.
and
Plus
they're like,
10% because I'm feeling like it today.
yes,
Yeah.
exactly. And women are like, oh, but maybe it's only $50 an hour, even though everybody else in the industry is charging $150 an hour. Maybe
Mhm.
that's not the best example, but I think it's important for us to dive into like these fears that we have as
Mhm.
women
Yeah.
are really primarily, generally speaking, like struggles that
Mhm.
only women are having. So
Mhm. Yeah.
anyways, I'm sorry. I just had to interject that because
I
I'm
love,
like, okay,
yeah.
men are not having this. And I'm just like, when I hear that, when I hear that only as women, not only
Mhm.
when women are struggling with this, it actually gets me more competitive. And I'm like, and I
Mhm.
wake up and I'm like, okay, Amy, knock it off. You are
Mhm.
just as valuable as what other people are doing out there. And it genuinely lights a fire into me and almost pisses me off because I'm like,
Mhm.
men don't have this freaking problem. Like, why am I struggling with this? So like that
Yeah.
feminist in me comes out and I'm like,
Yeah.
this is bullshit. Scratch
Right.
that mentality. Put a
Yeah.
better number on it. So anyways, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, I love that you said all of that because there are, I also don't know, I can't quote the study, but I've also seen so much content of this around that, on this around that, where, women undervalue themselves and men always get paid more and yada, yada, yada. And what I can share is what's helped me,
Mhm,
personally. Maybe that is helpful to someone else. So there are people I talk to when when I'm making my pricing, and I usually, there are people in my social circle or around me. I know some people struggle with this a bit more, and I know some people are a bit more healed in that way. So I tend to talk to the people, or who, someone like you who's now like really fired up, and even though you're still exploring this, you're still like, no, I want to be paid what I'm worth.
mhm,
So I would, generally speaking, try to have these conversations with people like that, or someone who's as fired up as you, because when I'm already struggling with this, then it helps me to be with someone, or just talk it out with someone who I know will challenge me and who
mhm,
will invite me to look for more growth. And then also, I think when it comes to money in general, do know it is very triggering. If you're listening to this, it is very triggering to a lot of people, because so many of our stories around, it's a tool for survival in many ways, right? And it's a tool for who we are as a society, how we see our worth and our value. In a way, for a lot of
mhm,
people, it is tied up to money. So I would also, when I'm having these conversations, try to see if I can find someone, or I can find people who maybe have already healed a little bit in that way. So when you maybe share the aspiration that you want with your business as a mom, that you want to make, I don't know, let's say $100,000 a year,
mhm,
because you can do that for sure.
mhm,
Then try and see or try and see if you can create maybe a community, or like a small group. It could just be 2 or 3 people around you, like-minded people, where saying that will not trigger them, but they will cheer you for it, or they might be saying something like, oh, that might be a bit far out of my imagination, and I love that you're doing that, and I love that
mhm,
your ambition is that. Because if you're still in the process of healing this thing within yourself and exploring it, it's really important to have people around you who push you and who pull you and who encourage you, and who don't maybe so much reflect your own challenges back to you, in that sense that maybe they're triggered and they're making a snide remark or something.
mhm,
So that I think is really important to begin with. And the other thing is, you can always do your research to sort of see where your price is at in the industry. If you see it's really low, then definitely raise it. And in the end, people are paying for. Someone told me this once, and I thought it was so helpful. People are paying for the value that solving. Well, you pay for how much it is worth to you that the problem that you're having is solved, right?
oh yeah,
So
mhm,
if it's a huge problem, you can put a huge price tag on it. Or if you can communicate this in a way that people are like, oh yeah, I need this problem gone from my life, they will pay anything. And then it's up to you to decide basically if what you're charging aligns with your values. That could be a conversation to have. If what you feel comfortable with, you can also do, I think it's also really important to do, and even if it's just back of the napkin math, but you need for a business with income and expenses, you need to figure out sort of how much you actually need to make for this thing to be worth it. Because if you're making 1,000 a month and you're spending 900, it might not be worth your time if that's sort of the long term. I mean, if that's the case in the beginning where you need to ramp things up and maybe your cost is a bit higher than what you're making, or no, sorry, I didn't say that well. If what you're making is, most of it goes to cost because you're investing in your business at that point, great. Like that's a different story. But if the long-term perspective is that it might not make sense economically, then that's a different conversation. But really, just, I think I also want to share this because this whole conversation of putting a price tag on what you do and your value is, do know that there are many different layers, and it's not just something that's like, you're bad at or that you struggle with or you suck at. It's, there's the societal level, there's the gender level, there's the personal stuff, there's maybe religious, connotations that come in, because I know in Christianity, there's this thing that money is deemed the root of all evil, which
right,
I think comes from a misreading, because I think it was the want of money. So basically greed is actually the root of all evil, not money in itself, because that's just fairly neutral. It's just a token for exchange that we have. So knowing all of these levels, if you're struggling with this right now, if you feel challenges around it, do know it's not just you being, it's not a personal deficiency, or it's maybe not something that you happen to suck at this moment. It's also something that you can explore, that you can look at. And I would say one of the best things you can do is really get yourself, even if it's just one friend or two friends, or just other mompreneurs who where you can create a safe space to talk with them around your ambitions around money, and where you make a deal that, everything is, no judgment. We're here to unapologetically support each other. And you're just going to make the deal to talk about this openly, because that can be so incredibly healing, especially for women, to openly talk about money and their financial ambitions.
Yeah, I love that a lot. In fact, one of my longtime friends, she's also starting her own business, quit her career, started her own business. And we've gotten even closer in talking about our entrepreneurial journeys and bouncing ideas off each other. And one of our biggest conversations that we've had, that we continue to keep having, is this idea of value that we have for each other. And we're constantly telling each other, like, nope, you need to level up. You need to level up. You need to, she recently packaged a couple of her services, and she was,
Nice.
right. Big hand claps. So proud of her. And I was one of the first people she reached out to like tell me, like, okay, I just made a decision. This is what I'm going to do. I am scared shitless because I feel like nobody's going to pay me for it. And she has been busier than she ever has been. Because
that's wonderful.
Is that amazing? Because she
so
then put a higher price tag on it, because she has grown, her knowledge has grown, and she's looking at what everybody else is charging within her industry. And she realized, like, I need to charge more. So by doing that, she's now valued herself more, and people see that number as a higher value. And people want things that are more expensive. They don't want things from the dollar store. That's like the best example that I can give you. Like, wouldn't you rather have a Prada bag than a dollar bag from the dollar store? Everybody wants that. Like, that's what you want. So I feel like very passionate about it. I mean, not that I could ever afford a Prada bag. However, exactly. And that's the other thing that I was going to dive into. Just because I can't afford something, or just because I won't spend money on something, doesn't mean that there aren't other people out there that will spend money on that. So you have to stop serving yourself in a sense, and start serving others, and realize, like, what you have to offer, people will pay money for. Like, it's like almost a guarantee. Somebody out there will, there's all of these different opportunities based on, especially if you're passionate about it, people are drawn to that passion.
Oh yeah.
So, I mean, just my personal example kind of mirrors what you were saying, and like kind of building that community. And it doesn't have to be a huge community. It can be like a couple of people that are like, yes, you need to, like encouraging your ambition. So I wrote down this idea, and I already kind of talked about it about leveling up, and I want to go back to like the mom and the Etsy shop example, and
Yeah.
and taking that to the next level, because I think there's sort of a fear around leveling up, right? So it's like, okay, you've established you have a business, you've established that there's people that are purchasing your product, but I want women to know, because stay-at-home moms typically at this day and age don't just stay home. They almost always have another way that they're generating an income, whether that's Etsy shops, making hand soaps, doing things at farmers markets. They always have, I don't really want to say a side gig, because I don't necessarily love this idea of side gig, but they almost all have another way of generating an income or a little bit of revenue. But once you've determined, I want to say this to encourage moms, once they've determined that they have a business and they have something that people are purchasing, there is a way to level up. And I think they're not leveling up because they're afraid of the amount of time that it's going to take them to do so. But what I want to say to that is that that fear is of something that hasn't even happened yet. So your fear is something is like, it's in the future. So unless you try, and unless you take steps forward to level up and to take that next step, you're never going to know. So if you're like, I have 4 kids at home, then I'm homeschooling, but I also have this soap making, I make these handmade soaps and candles, and but there's just no way I can grow my business because I just don't have the time. How do you know you don't have the time until you try? You have to try. And then if you get into it and you're like, okay, something is off balance and this isn't filling me up, then you can readjust and realign and pivot. But I think as stay-at-home moms, we're afraid of not having the time and then not being able to provide for our family in the way that we've provided for them in the past. And like I said, I'll just go back to it. The only thing I can say to that is you don't know that until you try. So, I mean, have you dealt with that in your coaching career, or do you have any thoughts on that as well?
I love that you're bringing that up, because it's, even though I haven't had a mom entrepreneur in my practice where that was the specific challenge that came up, I see it in other people, or I see it in other cases where this, leveling up and doing the next step, again, it brings up fears and internal stuff. But if we just for now were to stay with sort of the practicality of it, and being afraid of maybe not finding enough time, or dropping the ball on other things, there are, I 100% second what you're saying about trying it, doing it and trying it, because when you're afraid before you do it, and then you're afraid in the moment, you're actually scaring yourself twice, right? And there's no need, if you are anticipating the emotion and then you're feeling it again in the moment, then it better be a good emotion to feel twice, right? Because there's no,
Right.
yeah, no
And it
need,
needs
no
to have
need,
some validity behind it, but
yeah,
like that
yeah,
doesn't, that's not really valid. Yeah.
yeah. So no need to make yourself sad twice. Even though I know it sounds really easy me saying this now. Um, there are a couple of things just in terms of, or I could suggest to you, or maybe if you're listening to this and you're thinking about like, oh, but how do I level up? I have exactly all of those challenges right now. I can give you a couple of avenues to explore and see if that, has any oomph behind it for you. So one is, you could look at, you could ask yourself the question, what's essential? Because we tend to, especially when there's something ahead of us that we feel insecure about, or that we're a bit like, oh, this doesn't feel good. It brings up all those icky feelings, or those, uncomfortable feelings in us. Sometimes we create, this sort of side projects and side questions, and a lot of things clutter in our minds and in our lives. where we maybe also self-sabotage, right? So you could ask yourself the question, what's essential? Like, if I want to do this, what is the one or two essential, what's the one essential thing I need to do? Or what are the, like, if I can't, like the bare bones of the business, like making soaps, for example, like it's making and selling them, right? So how do I, is there anything going on around outside of that that I'm doing that does not serve the immediate, purpose of the business, which is making and selling soaps? I know I'm simplifying it a little bit, but just for, the purpose of the example. Anything else that is not for serving the core purpose of the business, you might consider whether you really need to do it in the first place, or if it's just a time sink because maybe you feel insecure, or you feel, or self-sabotage is coming up, things like that, where you're really getting in your own way and you're creating obstacles for yourself, or maybe you don't actually need them or you don't have them. Been there, done that. So
Right.
not speaking off of my high horse here. I see that come up quite often. The other thing is, can you outsource anything? Like, is there anything, if you've made a little bit of money, because when we're talking about up leveling, it sounds like there's some motion with the business. You can tell maybe, someone's buying this, people are responding in a good way to this. So do I have a little bit of cash? And even if it's just, for staying with the soaps, if it's packaging the soaps, like, is there maybe a kid in my neighborhood I can give $50 to for an afternoon to package the soap, right? Like, is it really essential that I do all of the steps in the business? Or is that also a thing where I feel like I need to control it because I'm afraid that, if I let it get bigger, it will get out of hand or will overwhelm me? Often or what I see a lot in my practice is that there's often emotional stuff behind what's showing up in the business, because more often than not the business is a mirror for what's going on inside of us. So that could also work, right? Like being really very simple around outsourcing. Like, you don't have to put up a huge post online. Like, literally, if you have maybe friends, or if you know people, teenage kids, or if maybe a college student, or you have a nice neighbor, who has a bit of time on their hand, and you can actually just like, look, I have $100, like, how much can you help me with that? That is a really easy way to outsource it. So that, and then I think the other question behind this could also be is like, what makes you scared of this? Or what is the intimidating thing behind scaling this or up-leveling this? Like, are you afraid of your own greatness? Are you afraid maybe of your own impact, what people are going to say, how you're being perceived? Maybe that also comes up.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that's, again, I think that's so much more common for women than it is for men. And I know we're speaking really generally, and maybe there's men that listen to this that are going to get kind of pissed off, which I don't really give a shit. But I mean, I just really feel like I hear that more often with women. And so I want people to know that as we're talking about this, like, you and I have had these same fears and considerations. And I think that people should understand that that's okay. So you have those thoughts, you have those feelings. Now, where do you take them? Like, how do you overcome those? That it's natural, it's normal, more normal than most people think. And instead of stopping right there with those limiting beliefs and those fears, you're talking about the tools and tips and the resources to like overcome those hurdles.
Yeah.
I think men have different hurdles to overcome. Maybe one of their hurdles is over ego, like an overinflated ego that they have to like then control down, where women's egos tend to be a little underinflated, where we're like, just trying to find that balance. So,
like,
yeah,
like that. Yeah,
exactly. Yes. Yeah. Like, I'm not sure if I should do this, and men are like, I mean, God, this is going to be terrible. Yeah. Balls to the walls. Let's go.
Yeah.
We're just going to jump in with like that, like that idea of risk. I know that's such a terrible analogy. I probably shouldn't have said that, but like literally, women are just tight, like more timid, and a lot of women aren't. And I fully understand that, but I think in general we are. So I love that you gave us some of those tips tips on overcoming that, and books to read. And one of the books that just totally have you read any of Jen Sincero's books, that like You Are a Badass?
Yeah.
Yeah.
One.
Yeah.
You're a
Okay.
badass.
So
Yeah,
yeah,
that's a good one. Yeah.
such a good one. And she talks about that and these limiting beliefs and this idea of money that we're talking about. And she gives a beautiful example of when she was undervaluing herself in her coaching for writing. And then she like jacked up her dollar amount and what she was asking for. And the person that she was coaching found what she was doing to be so incredibly valuable that they didn't even bat an eye and was just like unwavering, yes, absolutely, I will pay you that. And she was like, holy shit, what? Like, it just blew her mind. But I think that's a great example. And so that book, I think is a great resource for women too, if you're just kind of starting out. I'll put your book that you mentioned and this book also in the show notes. I think I've talked about it before on the podcast, but yeah, there's so many avenues that we can continue talking about, Johanna. So thank you so much for your insight. I want to kind of let this conversation lie with people. And if they have any questions, they can definitely let us know. But do you have anything else that you really wanted to share that maybe we didn't dive into yet? Is there anything else, or do you want to maybe save it for a different time?
I like that. Ooh, it's like the teaser.
Yeah.
Season 2.
Yeah.
I think, yeah, because you just said something that brought up a thought in me. What I found as I've been working on these things also is what's really helped me is seeking out examples of people who I felt like were a bit closer to who I was. So maybe not, Sheryl Sandberg, because that feels very far away from my reality, but somebody who's maybe a bit closer, where I can see like, oh, maybe they went to school for the same thing, or they also like dogs, or, it could be something silly, but really actively seeking out examples of people who sort of can be, you could call them an expander, someone who really expands your mind on what's possible. Because if you're especially deep in this process of where, things are hard and you don't really know, or you're going through, I think Brene Brown calls it a shame storm, which I love. I don't know if you've read her books, but where, it sounds like, or it feels like the world, like all your icky emotions are like sort of coming down on you, and all you can do is talk to yourself in a really shitty voice, is just seeking out examples of people who've done, or who've even just taken one step that you want to take. It could just be for something small, to really show yourself that what you want to do in essence is possible, which is why I love that you brought up the book You're a Badass, because that is just one example of someone who's, or the example she had with her rates, where raising her price worked out really well, and for someone who's listening to this to see it worked for someone else, and have such a positive, not to say to only look outside for those things, or for validation or something, but really sometimes it can help to see like, oh, she did it, so I can do it too. Or this and the other person did it, so 3 other people did it. Oh, cool. It can probably work out for me too. At least I found that that's helped me quite a bit. And then the inner work, what I keep coming back to is business is really, it's so funny, but for me and for a lot of other people I've talked to, it's been such a course in self-development. Like, it's probably one of the most profound and most challenging and most rewarding things you can do for personal development. It's like a crash course for it. Probably not quite like having kids.
Right.
I don't want to compare it with that, but it tends to hold up a lot of mirrors for us in terms of, especially value, direction, self-confidence. And that can feel really shitty in the beginning, or when you see like, oh, there's this thing again that I can't seem to solve. But at the same time, it can be, I try or intend to see it as a gift, or like as an opportunity to grow. It's like, oh, cool, now I can learn this, or now this is coming up. And if you're struggling right now, or if you feel you have a lot of challenges in that department, it's also an opportunity. It really is an opportunity to come home to yourself and to unlock sort of a different level of yourself or a different aspect of your personality that you maybe not haven't had access to yet, or not had the opportunity to develop that. And in that way it can be really cool.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, just to say that, because I know business tends to bring up stuff for people, and that's normal.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's why a lot of these entrepreneurial podcasts and anything that you read on entrepreneurialism and business, a lot of them have like the personal development alongside it, like right alongside it. And that mindset growth, that growth mindset, because it
Yeah.
all really mirrors each other and all goes hand
Mhm.
in hand.
Yeah.
So I love that. I kind of keep going back to this idea for my listeners too. You know, we've worked on establishing some routines and creating these healthy
Mhm.
habits within our lives. And for my listeners specifically, we've touched on all of these things to kind of set the foundation for a growth mindset. And, you know, we read
Mhm.
the 10 pages a day. Hopefully you're doing the Mama Mindset Reset Challenge, everybody, you know, so hopefully they're doing those things, and that lays the foundation for them to take this
Mhm.
entrepreneurial journey that they're wanting to take, or they've
Yeah.
already started to take, but they've laid the foundation in their lifestyle. They've laid the foundation at home for taking care of themselves, taking care of their household and their routines. And then they can then go
Mhm.
forth and level up their business, or try to
Mhm.
start a business. If you haven't started a business, like now you've set yourself up for a greater chance at success, at least by doing that inner work, by working on that foundational footing. So
Yeah, I
I
love
love that
that.
what you're
And
talking about is kind of mirroring that as well.
yeah.
But again, like I highly recommend you are a badass, because as you were talking
Mhm.
even about the money aspect of it, the chapter in there that she has on
Mhm.
money, if people haven't read that book, not to go too far into it, but I mean, she was living in a garage or in an apartment above
Mm.
a garage. And Jen Sincero is like world renowned now. You know, people know her
Mhm.
all over the world. I think she has books written in Japanese.
Yeah, I think
I mean,
so.
she's amazing.
Yeah.
But when you read her book, you realize where she came from, and she's very, very easy to relate to in her
Mhm.
concept of money. And her beliefs around money when she first started out are something that I think so many people
Mm.
will align with. And so when we were talking about that, I also wanted to reference that chapter she has in that book too, because that was
Mhm.
something that I aligned with. And I know a lot of other women that I've talked to also have aligned with as well, because she's just so relatable in that way. But
Yeah.
anyways, well,
Yeah. And
thank
if
you.
I,
Oh, no,
yeah,
go ahead. Yeah.
yeah, sorry, but I had
Yeah,
just you saying that. I had one more thought that I want to share, because I think
please
it's
do.
important. So, when you're a mom, for instance, and you're thinking about starting a business, or you're thinking about, how to do it all, and you're feeling uncertain, I think, your example with the podcast when you were beginning it and everything is, well, what if you don't do it, right? Like, what if you don't do it? What if there's someone out there who really needs what you're putting out there, like you and your podcast, which I think is so cool. And all, I listened to a couple of episodes, and there was mindset stuff in there. I was like, oh yeah, I'm gonna try that. This is cool. Like, there was
Mhm,
something I could tease out also from my life, even if I'm not a mom, right? Or not a
mhm,
mom yet. And but what if you hadn't done it, right? You would not have reached that number of moms who now can, have value in what you do, and you would not have been able to help them with the challenge or help them grow with the challenge. And the same goes for someone else who's listening to this. Like, if you don't do the thing, you might actually deprive somebody from something they really would have needed. And sometimes I think when we're very stuck in the whole, like, oh, but I'm shit and I can't do it, and this and this and this, when you it can help to really shift the perspective to somebody else and see, like, oh, but I'm not serving them by not putting out there what's in my heart of what I want to do, or how I actually want to be of service, because I have all of those fears. But then this person's never going to learn this. Maybe they're not going to have that experience. Maybe they're not going to grow. Maybe they don't get to do that thing, or maybe they don't get to have really nice smelling hands because my soaps are really awesome, right?
right.
Could be
Yes.
something small too. And so when you're deep, deep, deep in the pit of despair about how hard it is to start and run a business, and I know it can be challenging sometimes, maybe shifting the perspective to somebody else and how their life would be with or without the thing you're doing might actually be really helpful.
Yeah. Yes. I talk about that in the podcast a little bit, that if you're not
Oh.
bringing your best self, and it goes into
Mhm.
into entrepreneurialism as well, it's almost a
Mhm.
disservice to those around you.
Yeah.
It's a disservice to your community if you're not providing maybe
Mhm.
something that other people need. And that really goes full circle back into this concept of money also, because you cannot continue to serve others to your fullest potential if you do not have money coming in. You have to have money coming in to continue to provide value for others. So I think that's something that's really important. That was a huge mindset shift for me, is
Mhm.
that this idea of money actually can become selfless instead of selfish. I think sometimes we have this concept of money as being very selfish, but it's
Mhm.
actually it's a way to serve other people and more people, and to continue to grow is only helping other people. So
Mhm.
that's that selfless mentality and entrepreneurialism that I think really, really helps you grow, especially from a feminine standpoint, from a female-based
Mhm.
business. So
Yeah.
we could go on and on about this. I love this so much. I have so many takeaways for me to
Mhm.
apply to myself. So thank you so much for all of this, Johanna.
You're
I really
welcome.
appreciate it. So what is the best way for people to contact you if they have other questions?
Mhm. So the best way is basically to follow me on Instagram.
Okay.
I'm there, or you can on my website. So it's just first name, last name, Johanna Renoth. Or you can check out my website, and there's also an email address there, or you can just email me at johanna@johannarenoth.com. That also works.
Okay.
I'm more than happy to respond. Sometimes I take a little while because I try to not log on to email like 5 times a day.
Yeah. Yeah. Understandable. That's
um,
boundary, man. You got to do
yeah, yeah,
it.
yeah, yeah. Um, and I'm still really excited to hear from, if you've listened to this and you have questions, or you're looking for a coach, like feel free to reach out. I'm very happy to hear from you.
Yeah.
And thanks again, Amy, for having me. This was such a pleasure. And again, I'm thinking about how we were in high school. I was so
Yes.
shocked. You were so cool.
Oh my gosh, are
And-
you kidding me? No way. I can't even believe you said that. No, 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 no. Anybody that listened to that, we're going to just edit that out, scratch that out. I absolutely was not.
Oh,
No, that's
very
so
much.
funny. I do remember you being like incredibly sweet though, like just one of the sweetest people, and
Oh,
quiet, definitely quiet, but
oh
like
yeah.
so sweet to everybody, which I absolutely love. So yeah, 17 years ago, who would have known that that experience led us to this
Yeah.
incredible conversation? And
Mhm.
I look forward to having another one with you for sure. I love the idea of
I
doing the
love that.
Q&A.
Yeah.
So I will put all of your contact information in the show notes
Awesome.
below for
Mhm.
people, so you guys don't have to go back and rewind it and listen to it. I'll link up all of her stuff and your book recommendations too. I really
Awesome.
appreciate that. So thank you so
Good.
much, Johanna.
Thank you so much too.
All right, we'll talk to you soon.
Okay, talk soon.
Hey, Mama, thank you so much for joining me today in today's conversational journey with Johanna. I think you can see how that she's a wealth of information. Again, like I mentioned in the episode, I'll put all of her contact information in the shows below. I would love to have a Q&A opportunity with her for us to do a live version. You can ask her any business questions you have with something that's going on in your business right now at this moment. You can ask her any questions on how to get started, tips, tricks, things like that. So keep me posted on if that's something you'd be interested in. In the meantime, please don't forget to like and share this episode. Also, I would love to have a rating and review on iTunes. That helps me out immensely, more than I could ever describe and more than you could ever imagine. So thank you so much again for listening today. I look forward to talking to you again soon.